Bam! MC is in the house. What's going on, folks? My name is Justin Garcia, also known as Master Chim, and welcome to the Wednesday Warrior stream. I'm here every Wednesday at noon Eastern Standard Time, taking a topic, deep diving, and having a good time while doing it. Appreciate you guys hanging out. And as people start entering the live stream, let's take care of some housekeeping. If you are not getting my emails, you are messing up. I send an email out every morning. It is free. And if you do not get it already, you can go to masterchim.com. Bottom of the page is a form there. I wind up giving you a free power program video series on top of it just for entering my email newsletter. And if you have already signed up and you are not getting it, it is probably in your spam folder. A whole bunch of things have been going on with emails lately, but basically, if you have signed up, you used to get them maybe, and you don't get them anymore, it's probably because they're in the spam folder. Go check for it there. If it's not there, then do me a favor and just sign up again. I moved to a different email service provider, and so far it seems to be working well, but just want to make sure I'm not leaving anybody after the move. All right, so all that being said, who do we got here? Jesse, what's going on, brother man? Good to see you. Casetas, what's up, my man? Good to see you. Corey's in the house, as usual. Good to see you, brother man. Jamie, my man up in Canada, making it happen. All right. Who else we got there? Give me a shout if you're watching. Right now we're streaming on a couple of Facebook pages, on YouTube, and on X. The topic for today is something that I think, if you guys have been following me for any length of time, it's certainly something you've heard me speak about before. But today I do think that there's a little bit of value that I can put on top of it. Danny, what's up, brother man? Good to see you. And the value I'm putting on top of it is this idea of, what a hater is something that I think all of us would benefit from understanding, because it takes the idea of the type of person that we don't like. And what I want to get accomplished today is add a layer of accountability on top of that, to sort of just be honest with ourselves when we're acting in that way and when we're demonstrating the types of behaviors that we would relegate to the label of hater, should somebody else be the one doing it or doing it to us. So I would say that first and foremost, let's start off defining hater, right? So I've often said a hater is somebody who just ain't got enough going on, right? And the context of that is, I talk about having a bandwidth. Every individual has a bandwidth, and you look at the bandwidth as the totality of capabilities they have at any one given moment, right? Their cognitive level of awareness, right? The RAM and memory speed on the computer, I guess, is another analogy that works. And the idea of it is everybody has a different level of bandwidth, and how we decide to populate that bandwidth changes from moment to moment, as the day goes on, as the days go on as well. And when you look at somebody who is looking to be a hater, first and foremost, there's somebody who has a little bit too much time, unnecessarily so, meaning there are things that they probably should be doing that they're not doing because they want to save this piece of their bandwidth to criticize other people. Now, if you guys have ever read any Nietzsche, Nietzsche has a concept called, the way that we pronounce it is resentiment, right? Resentiment, not to be confused with resentment. Fucking English, Jesus, Justin, get it together. But resentiment is a little bit different from resentment, or at least there are plenty of people who make the distinctions. I don't necessarily think there's a lot of utility because they're all enough of the same ballpark that a talk or resolving one will put you in line to resolve the other. That's my stance. But resentment / resentment is really a distinction that I've heard made is resentment is something that's almost transactional in the moment, whereas resentment is more existential. Resentment is one person does something to another person, and that person has a sort of negative reaction feels that they were entitled to a different action. So we say that they resent what the person has done, or they resent the other person. Whereas resentment is this belief system that there is this group that is constantly acting in a way that this other group will resent them just because of the nature of their relationship. It's almost like a resentment system, a resentment hierarchy almost, regardless of what distinction, because I think it's a really a level of scale that distinguishes the two terms. But regardless of where we are in that scale, the basic gist of it is somebody who is displaying resentment or resentment is somebody who is not looking to populate their bandwidth with as much power as possible, right? So let me get to, all right, I had an email that I wrote a few months ago that defined, this is why you guys got to be on the email. Like, I'm literally going to read an email, because on this email I wrote exactly what a hater was, and this whole piece will probably be in the next book that I'm writing. But regardless, I'm going to read this email. A hater is somebody who just ain't got enough going on. A hater is someone whose bandwidth is unnecessarily available to harbor negative wishes for someone else, like some magicless wizard casting spells into the ether. Think about the foolish nature of such a state or moment. The hater invests his energy to try and undermine the trajectory of another's efforts. He's so entrenched in the slave's perspective that he's convinced himself the failure of his target somehow represents his own success. So, meaning he is so connected to the negative outcome of somebody else that when somebody else has a negative outcome, he feels like he has achieved some level of success. All the while, however, the hater remains too weak, cowardly, or both to actually fix the issue that has him so emotional in the first place. Therefore, ironically, haters aren't running on hate, but insecurity, frustration, and a contempt for a life over which they feel no control. They are passive, aggressive, emotional losers. To listen to the hater, as described in Tribalnomics, is to offer influence to someone who has already identified themselves as wanting to be an enemy. Again, this is possible under two conditions. Number one, you just ain't got enough going on. Or number two, you have a pathological addiction to everyone liking you because, well, see number one. The answer to dealing with a threat is direct engagement. But that's not what we're discussing here, right? No, the haters are those distractions that we choose to give a seat at the table. My advice, never waste your energy on negative wishes when it could be better used for positive pursuits. So the very notion, and that's the email that I wrote a couple of months ago, but the very notion that we are, number one, compelled or should be compelled to even deal with haters needs to be revisited, right? Are you somebody who has a process for dealing with haters that you find more effective than other processes you may have used in the past? Well, let me just summarize my point on this. Haters should be ignored because they are not threats. When they become threats, they should be dealt with as threats, in which case the fact that prior to becoming a threat, they were just a hater is almost irrelevant. Now, a potential counter argument, it would be wrong, but could be presented that, well, you got to pay attention to haters because they become threats. In which case I would say, so the way to control you is just to generate enough haters to distract you from what it is that you're doing, that logistically you're not going to be able to do what I want you to stop doing in the first place. In other words, worrying about haters allows you to be controlled. Okay. Like a slave, right? And this is the thing that I wanted to get at today. Whereas there is a slave mindset attached to people that we would label with the term haters, how we deal with these haters also gives us some of that same type of mindset. I made some joke. I don't know if it felt like a joke when you read it in today's email, but something to the effect of, they say that everybody at some point in their ancestry has a slave, And when we act like haters, it's proof, that we were related to them, whatever. I said it better in the email. At least I think I did. But the point of it is, if we're somebody who is allowing somebody else to decide how it is that we're going to conduct ourselves, how it is that we're thinking and then acting, then we are being controlled by that person. If you are somebody who sees somebody's success as something that should have fallen on, your lap as well. They've gotten all the success. I deserve that success. You needn't even tell yourself, I deserve their success, which is even, another level down the rabbit hole of being a slave. But just saying, I'm supposed to have this success that I don't have, and this other person does for reasons that I can't understand. Why are they successful and I'm not successful? Well, if you're an individual that looks to define your relationship with your outcomes based on the observation of other people's relationships with their outcomes, then at least acknowledge right off the bat that you are trying to develop formulas for which the variables you don't have full access. You don't know everything at play. I would argue that, sure, observe these sort of trends and routines and formulas and patterns that you could somehow look to replicate in order to find a way to do it yourself. You see somebody throw a football, you watch them and you say, you know what, I'm going to follow them, do what they do. And maybe that gives you enough of a formula modeled, display of the action to build a relationship with it yourself. But ultimately, as much as somebody's accomplishments, meaning their inputs created the outputs, as much as we could observe that, the total value of that is only ever going to be and how it can model us replicating that same process. Whether or not they are more successful or less successful does not add or subtract to our relationship with the thing. And why would we ever think that somebody achieving less is somehow equal to us somehow achieving more? As if, the more starving somebody else is, the more full and nourished we are. It just doesn't work that way. The problem, or the obstacle, I should say, for most people when it comes to this, I think is, there's a couple of different aspects. I'm not really ready to give a list, like the three things. I'm not ready with that, but I could certainly, just share a couple of insights where this is concerned. Number one, people are incentivized, rewarded even for being haters. There is something to, the resentment that Nietzsche talks about, allowing somebody to see themselves as part of a group that by definition is treated unfairly by some other group. And in the aquarium, this artificial ecosystem, often filled with surplus, it becomes the argument to wind up getting our hands on the resources. It becomes, in other words, an aquarium formula that may not have a parallel in the outside natural world. If I look at America now, right, the land of the fat, poor people, and I say, listen, my last name's Garcia. My father was fairly dark-skinned. If I wanted to try and really ramble on about all of the social, leverages or levers, I guess, that racism type talk would give me, I'd probably get my hands on some resources as a result. Born and raised in New York, I know a lot of people that were involved in New York City politics. Oh man, you guys have no idea. I know more than I want to know about New York politics. About how malleable the people are. How? By being convinced and then enraged that they're a part of a group that is in this sort of perennial victim relationship with some other group, and how that is leveraged into political power, which at some point gives you financing, At some point, it gives you budgets, which lead to envelopes and which lead to, jobs where you don't have to actually show up or do anything. And somehow you're still getting a check cut from you. Like, it is a racket. So in other words, the observation I'm trying to make is there are people who are so vulnerable, and I know I'm a little all over the place. Just fucking follow me. If you've never been on one of my live shows, then get used to it. It's a roller coaster at times. If you are so vulnerable that somehow controlling you winds up filling somebody else's pockets, it's like, isn't that what slavery was? You are controlled in a way that you cannot stop, and somebody else benefits from being able to control you. In other words, your identity is being invested into somebody else's outcomes. That's exactly what slavery is. So you have this, how do people start adopting these behaviors? Number one, they're showed it, right? This is the environment in which they are raised. These are the formulas that they learn and are armed with. So it only makes sense that they would leverage these same formulas. I'll give you an example. I grew up in New York City, thinking that nobody should have guns. Now, the irony of it, of course, was that everybody had guns, right? But nobody was supposed to have guns. You were raised to think only the cops and robbers are supposed to have guns. Cops and robbers, and maybe me, just in case I got beef with anybody else that has a gun, right? So there's always these little conditions that we're willing to throw in. But that was just who I was. So the idea that people would walk around with pistols on them, and they didn't have any sort of nefarious intentions, like, that was so alien to me, and that it was unbelievable. In other words, I was not even capable of believing the argument of why it was actually, never mind codified in the Bill of Rights, but also just productive to have individuals who had the right to carry a firearm. I was so disconnected from that, it was hard for me to even process the logic. And the fact that I did eventually process the logic was really a testament to the patience and the exposure over time that allowed me to build this relationship. Whereas now I'm pretty much as far on the other side as you can get in that particular case. So you have individuals that are raised in situations or raised in environments where they're led to think, you're supposed to think like this. I grew up in New York City. Who was the cause of all the problems? All the rich white businessmen who were Republicans, right? Not the other politically leaning ones, but just the Republicans. Like, this is what we're spoon-fed. This is what we're spoon-fed in schools, in the environments. It becomes sort of endemic in just the culture after a certain amount of time. Now, how can this happen, right? How is this? How the people that are in this environment so vulnerable to this level of suggestion and influence? It's because they're not actually doing shit in the real world that is separate from the plight of the aquarium. When I grew, I didn't grow up. My brother, he does everything, like carpenter, electrician, hunter, fisherman, car mechanic. He can fucking do anything. But I was always the one that was in the gifted classes and, the scored well on all the tests. And, everybody in the aquarium was telling me I was a fucking superhero. Everybody in the aquarium was telling him that, he was never really going to be good enough. He was never really going to be good enough. But here we are, in our late 40s now. I'm 49. My brother's 47, I think. He'll be 47. He was over my house the other day helping me work on my shed. I'm basically his gopher, his assistant, his apprentice, his lackey, because I don't have the skill sets that he does in this particular application. But if I look at life and the skills that a man should have, the skill set he's amassed is arguably 10 times the value of the skills that I've amassed. But nothing in the aquarium told him that. Nothing in the aquarium told me that. So you have individuals that become vulnerable to this type of leveraging because they're raised in environments where this becomes the sort of mechanism by which they acquire resources. The squeaky wheel gets the oil is the old phrase, right? Well, what happens when you have a society running or that experiment or that type of reality running at a societal level? You have fat poor people, right? You have families that generationally have no men in them. And some of them that the men act like women anyway. And I don't mean the transistors. I'm talking about those men that are so effeminate in their approach to adversity that they might as well be women. Right? So how is it that, let's get back on track here. How is it that when we look at what a hater is, how can we stop ourselves from being that way, right? We said one way that it happens is, we're trained to be that. Well, this second reason, which is somewhat connected to the first reason, but also could be dealt with, specifically, is that we are too weak. And so when we're weak, we run out of tools. So if we're looking at a problem that requires tools that we don't have, it's very easy to look at people that do have those tools and somehow build a story in our head that justifies why we should have those tools. How we're so close to the outcomes that we want, yet so far away that somehow we think the right story that we adopt in our mind will change those circumstances. I remember growing up in the Bronx having friends, and this certainly happened in high school. I went for 2 years to Bronx High School of Science, which is a test-based school. Like you had to take a test to get in. And it was a really good public school, but it was the first time I was really around rich kids. And the socioeconomic spectrum was spanned in the student body of the school. There were kids from the hood. There were kids from middle-class families, which I was certainly from. And then there were the affluent kids. And I had a hard time accepting that these kids had so much. It made me angry. I was a very angry adolescent. And what made me angry was my inability to retain the integrity of my identity in the face of other realities. What do I mean by that? I felt fine about my life. I was happy with everything that was going on until I saw these other people that, in my ability to process it, had more. They had more. Now, obviously, what they had that was more was materialistic, but through the minds of a 14-year-old, 15-year-old, how much of a reference, do I have to be able to look at things otherwise, right? The material differences between things is pretty much the only thing I was really aware of. I didn't have any real life experience to tell me otherwise. So I would look at these people and I would say they have all these things that are more and plentiful than me and my family. I look at my parents, my dad worked 25 hours a day. There's no way that his dad worked harder than my dad. Well, how come we don't have enough stuff? It's unfair. That's the conclusion that we come to. So there's a point in me. Why did I come to those conclusions? Because I was too weak. My mindset was too weak. And I say too weak because, again, the integrity of my belief in myself was compromised just by being exposed to the material assets of somebody else. What the fuck does that have to do with me? Obviously, years later, I would have sayings like, hey, rich people get divorced too. Rich people commit suicide too. Rich people, become addicted to drugs too. Rich people are depressed. Like all these different things, I now understand. At that time, I didn't. Well, what happens when you have a whole group of people that are doing nothing but reinforcing this dysfunctional story you have growing in your head? Well, then you start, displaying what Nietzsche would call this resentment. I would say more pragmatically, you start becoming a hater and you start focusing on other people's downfalls than your success. All right. What do we got here? All right. Officer involved. What's up? Aaron. What's up, Aaron? She says, is the Master of 24-Hour Cycle one of the programs you're giving away? Because I thought I signed up for it, but it's not like letting me see things. Yes. It is one of the programs that you get for free. I will actually, if you send me an email or a message, I will send you a link to be able to view it. Felix, what's up, brother, man? Al Jitsu, my man. He says a hater's a hood booger. They don't know about hood boogers. How? Johnny Groove, what's up, brother, man? Jan Saxa, good to see you, darling. Schadenfreude, the joy in others' suffering. Yes, Corey. You know, it's so prevalent that, you know, people have words for these things, right? And it's obviously something that that many people, maybe most, have had to learn how to deal with. Not only the haters that they're exposed to, but also the allure, the attraction of becoming a hater themselves. I was talking to my mastermind group this morning, and I said, if you are not getting an outcome that you want, it could be really reduced to two things. Number one, you don't know what you're supposed to do in order to get that outcome, meaning there's some level of ignorance. There's an information deficiency, right? I don't have the information necessary to be able to do the things that I want to do. So that's part of it. But the other part is, once one is resolved, the second part of it is that you're just too weak to do it. And if we understand that if I'm not getting the outcome I want, I don't know what to do, and or I'm too weak to do it, if we don't complicate it at the highest level, at the foundational level, are those opposites? I think you know, at the core, right? At the core, first and foremost, universally, however many other words I can think of to describe it. If you understand that it is only those two things and everything else falls in one of those two categories, then it'll keep you oriented on the task at hand. An example that I used, I think this morning on my mastermind call was the losing weight thing. You know, it's like you should lose weight, you know, or I want to lose weight, so stop eating. But I tried that and maybe, you know, it didn't work. And it's like, no, that's not, if you stop eating as much, you'll lose weight. Yeah, but sometimes it's hard because I work a lot and at night when I have to eat, it's like, well, listen, we'll get to that later. But number one, all you need to do is lose weight. Do you understand that? It's like, you got to get the person to say yes. So it's like, all right, so you understand that that's the method, right? That fits the first box, right? How to do it, right? Eat less calories, caloric deficit, however you want to describe it. That's number one. But then it goes to number two. All the stories means fucking nothing. You know, it's like, well, just eat less. Yeah, but well, shut the fuck up. Right. And I like reserving, and I mentioned this morning, I like always being, 2-3 lines away from telling somebody, then shut the fuck up about it. Because if anything, I'm the only advocate for their power in this conversation. I'm telling them, well, it's up to you. Well, no, it's not really up to me. No, it's up to you. Because that's what's really happening. Well, you should eat less. Yeah, but, when I'm saying you should eat less, I'm saying it's up to you. And they're going, no, but, I work all day. And then at night when I can't, what they're saying is it's not up to me. And then I go, well, then shut the fuck up about it, which it's up to you. Then just say you don't want that outcome. And it's the accountability that really people shy away from, because then there's a process that's connected to it, right? So if you're somebody who's going to say this is unfair that they have those things and I don't, there's catharsis in that. There might be some actual leveraging for the acquisition of resources in the right aquarium, being the victim, a squeaky wheel gets the oil sort of thing, right? But on top of that, you also remove the process of learning how to do the thing that those other people did. I remember a couple of years ago, I was on, I used to say yes to every podcast that I was invited on, right? And I was on some doozies. And I was on this one podcast where the guy, I actually liked the guy, likable dude. He just wanted to rail on about Jews. But the Jews and the Jews and the Jews, and then there's the Jews that are working with the other Jews. They made the Jews get more stuff that the Jews have. like that's what I heard when I'm talking to him, right? But he wasn't that obtuse about it. But basically, my reaction was, so like, why are you complaining? Like, what is there to do? And to me, any group, whether it's Jews or some other group, and I've said this for over a decade now on social media since I've been putting stuff out. Like, if there is somebody who's running a formula that works, first and foremost, pay attention to the formula. But I don't discard somebody at a group level in matters that don't require that level of generalization. Oh, I don't like this guy. Why? Because he's a black guy, and we all know how the blacks are. It's like, oh, okay. Is this guy like that, though? Well, I don't know, but he is black. It's just a low level of running a relationship with how formidable one is becoming. Like, you are, in other words, you're going to learn a lot less if that is the way that you are processing information. I'll give you a good way to assess what I mean, right? When you are looking at the world and it makes you angry or sad, you're doing it wrong. Like, that's it. Like, then there's these guys and these guys and this. It's like, all right, let's say all that's true. Why are you so upset? Like, that's one of the things that I will never sign on to. All these things are fucked up. Well, they're not fucked up. They are the way they are. So at the very least, say they are the way that we would prefer them not to be. Right? We could say that. That's fair. But say this is fucked up is almost like starting to build the case for being upset. And again, why does this happen? Why do people allow themselves to get upset about things? It's because they're too fucking weak to handle it without the emotional encouragement that getting upset gives them. In my martial arts schools, sometimes, or a lot of times during sparring and stuff, I'd play R&B, I'm playing reggae, I'm playing the type of music that gets people relaxed. And whenever I would have my instructors or other students have access to the radio, it's always some angry yelling, fucking kill, rah, rah, everyone's going to die. And as much as I would try to explain it to them, maybe they just don't fucking agree with me. I don't know, but they'd be fucking wrong. I'd agree with them, but then we'd both be wrong, right? That's the phrase. I don't need to be upset to beat the shit out of somebody. I don't need to be angry in order to give my all. Of course, there's something to be said for the sympathetic nervous system and the boosts in our capabilities that we get momentarily if we are in an enhanced state, right? The fight or flight response is activated. We have, physiological changes that make us more formidable in a physical altercation. Like, yeah, I get all that, but that's not what I'm fucking talking about. I'm talking about this crutch that people need to be fired up to do the right thing, and right in the context of what gives them the outcome that they've claimed to have wanted, right? Right, in my philosophy, is synonymous with on mission. But this is the problem that people have. They don't become strong enough so that when it comes to doing the right thing, they need to be upset in order to do it. They need to get fired up in order to do the right thing. Like, I haven't butchered many animals in my life, admittedly. Not that I think you guys thought I had, but I just haven't. But when somebody is butchering a cow or a pig or a chicken, getting ready to prepare them to be eaten, whatever the case is, do you see these like farmers like putting on heavy metal and like pacing in front of the cow? Like, oh man, you're going to fucking get it now. You're going to get it now. That's not what they do. What do? They do their fucking job. They don't have to get all excited. Why is everything a big fucking production in order for people to be productive? It doesn't make any sense to me. Oh my God. I have so much fun talking with myself. All right, what else is going on here? I'm just fucking rambling at this point. I think I got my point across, but let me know if you guys have any questions. Corey writes, never let haters see you stress or lose your cool. Well, I'll add, never change what you're doing because of haters at all, right? Haters should be ignored, right? Haters are pebbles under your feet, right? It's hard to remind yourself of that when every single time you see a pebble, you lay down next to it and go, hey, don't go under my foot, okay? I'm about to walk this way. Envy is the way lesser men admire. It's true. It's all they're capable of. Everything is a commentary on them. They can't appreciate beauty. It's like a jealous woman. She sees some hot lady walking down the block. And she'll just make grunts like that until she can think of something to say. Look at those shoes. Those things came out 3 years ago. Whatever fucking trivial, criticism they have. That's what an insecure woman would do, right? And that's the thing about haters. Like, you got to let them be. They got to work that shit out on their own. You got to let them work that out on their own. Ain't got nothing to do with you. I got shit to do, right? It's like, what should I do with haters? It's like, number one, like, why the fuck you got to do anything about them? Just let them do what they're going to do. Yeah, but what if they become an enemy? Well, then ask me, what do I do about enemies? It's a different conversation, right? Cherrytown Vibe, what's up? Willie, what's up, my man? Aaron writes, I had a life that took credit for everything that went well, but blamed everyone else for everything that didn't. Related, kinda. That's from an old email. Right on. Right on. Absolutely related. So somebody on Facebook got a message sent. That's one of my message bots. Somebody wrote something that triggered something. So somebody's get something for free, I guess, on an email. Al-Jitsu writes, groups of haters join together leads to communism. Absolutely right. And it's funny, but you look at the historicity of what happened that can be explained through resentment, Nietzsche's resentment. And Marxism is at the core of it. This guy may not have done anything to you, but his group, by nature, does things to your group. So that needs to be addressed. Even though you ain't got a problem with that dude, he's just got to go because of what his group and our group are positioned as. Like, it's just fucking weakness. It is only weakness. I remember Thomas Sowell talking about the financial or social mobility and citing some study some study on millionaires, on what percentage of the U.S. population was millionaires, and how it stayed almost around the same level, like pretty much didn't make any significant changes over this time period of this study. But one of the things, and everybody was like, see, the same, 3% has the wealth just like they always have. And one of the things that he shared about this study that wasn't, readily understood on the face value of it, who was in that group had changed over time, which means some people entered that top 3% and then left that top 3%. And don't quote me on the figures, but the general sentiment of the study I'm getting right. And it was the fact that there was a percentage of the population that was always this much richer than everybody else. But who was in that group changed from year to year. Right. And that is the sign of a system where, okay, that you got a shot, which I don't know why anybody thinks they're supposed to get more than that, But what happens when you're like, yeah, I heard one guy saying in some videos watching, what's the difference with somebody's quality of life at 100 million if they have, or 200 million? Like, why do they need an extra 100 million? And it's like the basic premise of the question I would be curious about. Like, what is the value of that question? Like, just get to the point. You just want to take this guy's money, right? So say you should take the money, make a case for taking the money. But a case for taking somebody's money is not, well, he's not really doing anything with it. That's not a case for it, right? Take it because you, listen, have the balls to say, because I want it, right? Motherfuckers get robbed every day, right? The story about, oh, well, this is why, because at some point you're saying the method by which he acquired it is invalid. Right? It's like, oh, it's good if a guy becomes successful at business, but then there's a point where it becomes too good. If you become too good, then at some point that transitions into bad. Like, it just doesn't make any sense. At least I haven't heard the case for it to make sense up until this point, right? And I've had a lot of these conversations. Tuhan Tom, what's up, brother man? Good to see you. Corey writes, people need to blame an enemy to excuse themselves for all the work they need to do and to control their own lives. Everybody needs a fucking story. Very rarely do people choose reality to be that story. Like I've often said, it's not my phrase, but something I use, like, never let the truth get in the way of a good story. But there is something to be said for it. And I think I spoke about this morning. I do a lot of coaching. I have a lot of coaching groups and stuff. And sometimes I have these conversations multiple times a day, multiple times a week, and it's all a blur. But there are times where your logic and reason will fail you. And that's a tough idea for people to wrap their head around, because everybody's so addicted to reason. Everybody's so addicted to logic. Everybody's so addicted to empirical data. Yet for some reason, they're unwilling to acknowledge that there are so many people who on paper are supposed to be doing so much worse than we are, yet somehow we objectively know that they are doing better. These people don't make as much money as I do. These people don't have, as attractive a wife. They don't have children who are as smart as mine are. Why are they always so happy and we're always so miserable? Like, there's something that always transcends our ability to track reality that we have to have respect for, which means there's a limit to even logic and reason. Now, this starts to get a little controversial, so I don't want to go down this rabbit hole too much. But let me just say, when we can be honest with ourselves enough to say, you know what, I'm not happy the way things are going, that's a good start, because it tells you got to do something different. But if everything that you're doing is the sum total of what your logic and reason dictate that you should be doing, then it gives you the opportunity to transcend the limitations of your logic and reason. If your logic and reason are only giving you a reality that you think is unacceptable, well, then, yeah, you got to figure out something else, right? I'll leave that portion at that. Tuan Tom writes, lions don't concern themselves with the cries of lambs. I don't know what book it was. I'm pretty sure it was Nietzsche. The genealogy of morals, maybe. But there's this idea of there being birds of prey and lambs, and how lambs, and this was, I'm pretty sure it was Nietzsche, was to illustrate the concept of resentment. Basically, the lambs have no power over the birds of prey. So these birds are deemed evil by the lambs, because all they could do, since they can't do anything about the birds, they just have to create a value system that at least denigrates or insults the birds. And they say that the birds are evil. And because the birds are so evil, and because they're on the opposite side of the birds, well, what must that make them? They must be good. So these powerful predators that they are vulnerable to existentially, they have to be evil, which means by default, I happen to be good. So what becomes good? This is where the slave mindset starts to grow. It must be good to be weak. It must be good to not be powerful enough to destroy other things. It must be good. And the irony of it, of course, is where the hawks, they're like, well, I think the lambs are good, but I'm not evil. Well, then why are they good? Because they're delicious. That is the difference between those two different types of individuals. Are you the person that everybody who has everything that you don't want must be evil in order to tell yourself that you're somehow good? Well, being on the other end, one of the things we see, guilt, right? There's a lot of guilt going around, a lot of kinds of guilt, right? We won't get into the kinds of guilt we're seeing, but a lot of guilt walking around. Guilt is absolute nonsense. Guilt is a waste of fucking time. So much of my process for dealing with things like guilt is, okay, what are you going to do? If you don't know what to do, then find something to do. But if you know what to do and can't do it, or you're too weak to do it, shut the fuck up and want to do something else. Want to do something you can do then. Because if you want an outcome and you know how to get that outcome and you're too weak to do it, either become stronger or want something else. It doesn't have to get any more complicated than that. Right? But those of you guys that are in positions of strength, position of power, don't give that away because somehow somebody shared a story with you that is making you, revisit and reassess the value of your strengths and your powers. Like good-looking people shouldn't feel guilty about being good looking. Rich people shouldn't feel guilty about being like, it's just all such a waste of fucking time. Having some ugly chick fucking hate a good looking chick because the good looking chick's so good looking. Like, if I threw a couple of bricks at that good looking girl's face, it ain't gonna make you any more fucking pretty. So the whole premise is flawed. This whole system that somehow is transitioned or converted into this moral system, like it's just a waste of fucking time. Right? All the lambs calling all the hawks evil. It's like, don't be one of those. Don't be one of those fucking lambs. Or if you find yourself in a hawk position, don't go lie down and start eating fucking lamb food just so you can get their approval because you bought in somehow that the argument that they're so weak has made them moral means the only way you could become moral and good is to become just as weak as them. That's not the fucking way reality works. There will always be a segment of people, a subset of humanity that never buys into that bullshit. And those people will always be in control. All right, guys, let's stop it there. Oh, man, that was fun. That was fun. I appreciate you guys giving me an excuse to laugh at my own stories. I find myself to be thoroughly entertaining. I appreciate you guys. I'll be here next week. Again, if you guys aren't getting the email, let me know. But aside from that, brothers and sisters, have a great week. And as always, pressure to power.